it may be English, but prepare to not be able to understand anything that they say for the first couple of weeks. Even after I served in Ireland first, so I got to hear the Ireland accent, the Irish accent, and then when I hopped over to Scotland, I had to learn everything again. I had to learn how to understand people. I mean, everyone can understand you. They have American television, American TV shows, so they understand your accent just fine. But saying the other way around isn't as easy. The Scottish accent, I mean, my accents are farcical, basically. I mean, if any actual Scottish people hear them, then they say, oh, that, they'd say, oh, okay, Crosby, that's rubbish, so it is. I'd be like, I'm sorry, I'm trying my best. And they say, oh, you'd have to do better than that. That'd be the Scottish people. They're a lot more rough around the edges. That they have interesting words and sayings that we've never heard before. On a day like today, they'd say, oh, it's pure drist today. And you say, what? I'm sorry? It's pure drist today? What? I'm sorry. So they have the word drist. And drist is like gray or, kind of not sunny, kind of wet, because the weather there, I mean, it rains nine days out of 10, at least once in the day. So they saw, on a particularly gray or bad day, they say, oh, it's pure drist. Or they say, come on, get Ben. And I said, get Ben, get in here, get through, come on through, get Ben. Oh, and obviously they say I. I have that habit now when people are talking to me, especially when I talk to someone who's Scottish. I'll say, okay, aye, all right, yeah. And they'll say, they'll ask you how you're doing, and the traditional response is, oh, I'm not too bad, I'm no bad, or I'm alright. And that means they're doing really good. If someone calls you all right, then you're okay in their books. I mean, Ireland's a little bit different. It's a whole other accent completely. Irish is a lot more sing-songy, if I were to put it, their intonations. The way that they speak is a lot more sing-songy, so it is, it's a lot more up and down in their voice. Being from the west part of Dublin, I learned that very quickly. And then you can go over to West Ireland, to a place called Cork. I loved Cork. Cork is a beautiful town, but they all called it Cark. Here from Cark. The Northern Ireland is different altogether, which I loved. I loved how different you cross over that border, and people speak a lot differently. They say, oh, you get the bus, it'll cost you about £5, so it will. I'm from a place called Portadown. Portadown's a town in Northern Ireland, so it is. You never heard of Northern Ireland before? You just heard of a republic? Well, that's too bad, so it is. And there's the joke going around is that Northern Ireland is the only place where you don't need a second witness for the truthfulness of the gospel, because you can get up and you say, I know the church is true, so I do. The Book of Mormon is the Word of God, so it is. Because they end everything with those sort of sayings, and I love it. This here, oh, I've been here for hours here in church. When you get out here, get out here right now. It's just wonderful. And so the accent was one of the best things. I loved learning new words and just learning to understand the people there.
It is English for sure. They do have some different words, and the accent definitely differs from city to city, like big city to big city. Like, I served in Glasgow and Edinburgh, and they're only about 45 minutes apart, but there's a distinct difference. Their accent, very distinct. And they even use different words in two different cities. I hope I get this right, but like, for a baby in Glasgow, they'd call babies weans, like weans. And then in Edinburgh, they'd call it bairns, like, oh, my bairn. And that's another thing. When I first got my call, I have a sister-in-law she's from England, so she knows about Scotland. And I read my call, I was like, oh, I'm going to go to Edinburgh. And she's like, no, never say that again, because that's not how you say it. I was like, oh, it's Edinburgh. So Edinburgh. They also roll their R's in Scotland a lot. That's just part of the way they speak English, I guess. And but yeah, like, for example, another word not everyone says this, but instead of no, they'll say ken. Like, for I don't know, they'll say I dunny ken. And so, like, I dunny ken what you're saying. My accent's not very good, but I like to pretend sometimes. I'm trying to think of what other words they use. Like in Glasgow, for example, a lot of times they won't say hi. People in the street will just be like, all right. So, like, all right, big man. And that's how they'll get your attention. Let's kind of wave at you and say stuff like that. And yeah, they talk really fast sometimes, and you just got to get used to it. For example, lake. They don't say lake, they say loch. So you've heard like Loch Lomond or Loch Ness. Those are just lakes. That's what loch means. What else is there? There's a lot of words that are British as opposed to American. Like, they don't say the trunk of a car, they'll say the boot of a car. Or they don't pronounce it garage, they say garage. There's some other, they spell things differently too. Like, I thought it was funny that they, instead of spelling tire, T-I-R-E, they spell it T-Y-R-E. So the tires of a car, T-Y-R-E. It's mostly similar. It's just getting used to how they say things, and a lot of times, like, the more people watch like American movies, or their accents won't be as thick, or the more they work around people from, because it's also like a melting pot, like I said, like people from Aberdeen moved down to Glasgow, and so they'll work with people from Glasgow, and their accents will kind of start to mimic each other a little bit. But there are some people you'll meet, especially like just the common Joe Schmo on the street. You know, his accent can be really thick sometimes, and it's just old people too. Their accents can be really thick, and you just gotta really listen. Sometimes that's gonna say it again, but by the end, you know, you get really used to it. It's kind of funny sometimes, especially in Edinburgh. It's a big touristy city, and sometimes we hear Americans who are there, and my companions and I would just kind of cringe and just like, oh, they sound terrible. But we don't miss that. But
the trunk of a car is a car boot, and a flat is an apartment. You'll learn the rest of the stuff. There's just some funny things that take some time to get used to, and you'll get used to it. The thing to know about accents is that they're different from city to city. It's quite striking, actually. So you can be in Waterford, and you can tell if someone is from Dublin or if they're from Cork or Galway, just by the way they talk. Instantly, you will know this, and they're, so the accents are that different, and it's really bizarre because, let's say, the travel time by car from Galway to Limerick are two major cities in the west that have different accents. But it's about 2 hours to drive there, and they have these different accents. Now that's abating a little bit because as the economy grows, everybody is a little bit more mobile. But back in the day, we heard from some of the older people in Belfast that they used to be able to tell by slight inflections and by slight differences in the accent. They could tell what street someone was from. You know, hey, do you live on James Street? Yeah, I do. They could just tell by the way you talked, because people, for the most part, were born, lived, and died on basically the same street. For most of their history, Ireland was pretty close to a third world country, very poor, and there was not a lot of mobility. And so it's only recently that that's starting to break, and that's why there's such a difference city to city in the accent.
One thing that they say a lot, especially in like the Dundee, Montrose area, they say I can, which means like I know. Like, I can. Do you can? You can? And it just means like, are you aware? Do you know? And in Ireland they say like, what's the crack? Like, what's the news? And that's kind of cool. But one cool thing, actually something that's really funny, is in Scotland there is another language. It's Gaelic. And some people do speak it. Not everybody. Like, everybody who speaks it, like, speaks English as well. But there was this elder several years ago. I do not know his name. But if you want references, I can definitely point you in the right direction, because I know the members who were involved in this prank. It's quite funny. There was an elder who came into the mission, and he gets to the mission home, and his trainer is going to be taking him up to the islands. And the islands, everybody, well, most everybody, has a pretty good handle on Gaelic. And so, as they're flying up there, the trainer's like, "Hey, so did they teach you Gaelic in the MTC?" And the poor little trainee, "No, they didn't." "Am I supposed to know it?" And he's like, "Ooh, yeah, you're supposed to know it. Like, you're supposed to be pretty good. Can you bear your testimony in it? Like, say a prayer in it?" And he's like, "No, I can't. I don't know any of it." And he was stressing. He's like, "Well, we're gonna have a lesson. We're teaching the restoration when we first get there, and this is an investigator. I believe he's golden." The trainer was like, "You can't mess this up. Like, this is an important lesson." And the little trainee is like, "Oh my gosh, like, okay, like, I'm gonna really pray and really hope that everything turns out okay." And they got there, and they had this group of members. The trainer had a group of members, like, specifically one of the guys in the ward who spoke Gaelic very well. And he was going to pretend that the trainer could speak Gaelic. The trainer was just speaking gibberish. But this member was actually speaking Gaelic. And they were talking back and forth, and it was like a really, really in-depth lesson. And this poor little elder is just sitting outside like, "Oh my goodness, like, what did I get into? Like, I didn't know this was a foreign language mission." And it turns out, like, they eventually told him because he started getting a little bit upset. But they told him, and it turned out to be something that everybody got a few laughs out of. And it was great. So that's one of the stories the members told us up there about, like, the language and language barriers. So they mainly just spoke English. Like, they taught us how to say cheers. So you say cheers shlanjava, and that's Gaelic for cheers. Like, raise your glasses to the sky, you know? So that's the only real Gaelic word I know.